It took nearly 40 years to bring He-Man and Skeletor back to the big screen. But does this film have the power? Find out when Johnny Torch reviews Masters of the Universe. Welcome into another Johnny Torch Reviews. Well, it's a very hot, steamy, sticky, muggy summer evening. Also, my nephew's birthday. Happy birthday, baby David. And I seen Masters of the Universe a couple of days ago. And of course, we are going to talk about that right now. Now, I am a huge Masters of the Universe fan. I'm an old school Masters of the Universe fan. I had the action figures before it became an animated show. I just loved the way they looked. I remember my grandmother telling me, they look so heavy. They look heavy as heck. I don't want to get you those, but I just persisted in asking for a He-Man action figure. This would have been back in, 1982. So, of course, I am the target demo, I guess, mostly for this film. So you're going to hear me talk about this as a purist, someone who grew up with every incarnation of He-Man. Now, I'm not sure how interested you are in the history of He-Man. A lot of people seem to want to just downplay its importance as, oh, it's that goofy kids show that lasted about 3 years and nobody really cares about it. No, there is a really devoted following for folks that grew up with this, and it means something to them. And I, of course, am one of them. It started off as a toy line, a very fun toy line. There was no action figures like this before, not many since the 80s at least. And, it came with a comic. The comic tried to give some idea of what the storyline was. It was very different in those days. Teela was a weird amalgamation of what we know now as Teela and the Sorceress. We also had the Power Sword split into two, Skeletor having one half, He-Man having the other half, and both swords were needed to be combined in order to enter Castle Grayskull and have the power of the universe. A lot of those things were changed, and I remember seeing the commercial, the, coming soon, Filmation, the He-Man Masters of the Universe show. And I remember thinking, this is different. This is not like what I've been reading in the little comic books. This is Prince Adam. And he was a very Don Diego type character. He was, meek and lazy and wanted to be off fishing, and he didn't really want, like a Clark Kent. He didn't want to be part of the action. Teela was the captain of the guard, the daughter of Man-at-Arms, the guy in charge of the planetary defense. And so she thought little of him, much like a Lois Lane Clark Kent relationship. And that stuck well. That was good. Orko was a favorite of mine as a kid. I remember being him for Halloween one year. I had this cool magic wand, and he was sort of what folks would probably consider the Jar Jar Binks of the show, always getting into trouble and trying to do something right and messing up, and then He-Man would have to save his bacon and explain the situation where he went wrong. Skeletor, of course, it's sort of a prima donna. He got really cranky when he didn't get his plans go his way, and that's sort of something that was a standard for cartoons in those days. Cobra Commando wasn't too far removed from Skeletor. I can't think of too many other shows right now, but it was kind of what you did in the day. And the toy line grew and at an amazing rate. There was a lot of action figures. I'm pretty sure I had all of them. I think I pretty much had all the play sets. The show really only lasted about 2 years, but they made so many episodes because it was a syndicated show, which means they were on daily. And these episodes were, recycled year after year. And so there was literally only 2 seasons, but it was on TV probably for a good 4 years, maybe, unimpeded. And sadly, they decided to abandon the cartoon, even though that the toy line was still pretty strong, and they put their chips on She-Ra, which in theory was a good idea because you opened up another section of the He-Man universe. It's, open for little girls, which I think a lot of little boys actually watch the show, possibly more than the little girls. It took the Hordak line, which, uh, villains that were, it was basically, Hordak was Skeletor's boss, and he sort of double crossed him and sent him to Etheria. She-Ra was actually working for Hordak in the Secret of the Sword movie. He-Man finds her, his twin sister. And of course, it led to a couple of seasons of a She-Ra TV show. And, they put their chips in making those episodes instead of making more He-Man. Now, He-Man, of course, guest starred. Like I said, the crossover appeal was for the little boys to watch She-Ra mostly. Then at the tail end of the cartoon era, we had the Masters of the Universe movie in 1987. At that point, the popularity of the show was beginning to wane somewhat. The toy line was nearing its end. They had the Big Eternia play set. I remember I had that as a kid. And the Masters of the Universe movie was surprisingly dark considering what the cartoon show was. And they threw out a lot of the core concepts of the show. He-Man did not have a Prince Adam identity. The creatures were a little bit more fearsome, Beast Man and Karg. And of course, Skeletor himself was played by Frank Langella to perfection. Meg Foster as Evil Lynn. Dolph Lundgren as He-Man, who just comes straight from Rocky IV as Ivan Drago. So, and of course, famously, they took the money from Superman 4 in order to make Masters of the Universe, which, the special effects were somewhat better. The film basically was rushed at the end because they were running out of money even then. But again, surprisingly dark. I mean, when I was a kid watching Skeletor monologuing about being a god and He-Man getting flogged, I mean, it was some pretty intense stuff, and it really turned out to be like a classic. It's an 80s classic, even if it wasn't exactly, it was probably, I would say, about 35% there from the He-Man lore. So as time went by, they tried to bring back He-Man, The New Adventures of He-Man. It was a show, a cartoon show. I don't think it lasted very long, maybe a year. I hated it because it was basically reinventing He-Man. It was just He-Man and Skeletor in more of a sci-fi age. They gave it sort of an update to make it look more sci-fi. The figures were smaller. It just didn't feel like He-Man to me, so I didn't follow up on it. I don't think I've ever watched the cartoon. I collected maybe one or two of the toys before I was like, nah, this is not for me. Of course, all the kids that grew up with He-Man at this point were becoming teenagers, and it wasn't really that big of a deal to begin with to try to pick up a new version of He-Man. The memories were still there of the old version that we loved, and why would you want to start anew with a new He-Man? Time goes on, another decade or so. We've got the 2002 He-Man animated series, Masters of the Universe, where they tried to address some of the things that were a little odd in the original film, in the original series, Filmation series. Adam now looks different than He-Man. Basically, He-Man, when Adam becomes He-Man in the original show, he basically just has a tan, and there's no real difference, and they played that up. They changed some things in the lore that I didn't like. Cringer didn't speak. Randor, He-Man's father, was the brother of Skeletor, who was known as Keldor. And I didn't like that either because making Skeletor the uncle of He-Man was terrible. They explained away Man-at-Arms being her uncle and Fisto being her father. Again, I didn't like that. Then you flash forward about another 10 years and maybe a little more than that, and we had Kevin Smith doing the He-Man project, the animated series, Revelation. I think there was another one. I forget what the second show was called that he kind of followed up on. I didn't watch these. They were on Netflix. I probably could have because I had Netflix off and on at the time. But it was at the height of the woke era, and everything I was seeing of it was not very good looking. I mean, Tila with the lesbian haircut. He-Man is taken out in the beginning, supposedly dead. Of course, he's going to come back, but it just didn't seem like something I was interested in. And knowing how the woke era was at that point, I really didn't want to subject myself to seeing a childhood favorite go down in flames, kind of like I had just done with Star Wars. So it came out at the wrong time if they were going to try to revive it. I think they did another more juvenile revival of He-Man since then. Again, I don't know much about it other than seeing some of the toys on shelves. The collector's market for for the figures based on the animated series, the original, came back. I picked up a couple of them. They were trying to do more filmation based sculpts of the characters. For instance, Man at Arms had the mustache now. Duncan has the mustache. When I was a kid, I used to take a blue ballpoint pen in order to color in a mustache on Duncan. But again, so that's that's sort of the history of He-Man. We also, I want to address because a lot of people take He-Man as sort of a meme, and there was a lot of that going on in recent years. Oh, He-Man is gay, and He-Man is it's played for laughs and this and that. This was serious stuff for us, and I think a lot of the true fans were hoping that we were going to get a serious take on the property, because when you look at it, it really does have a strong, serious tone to it, but palatable for children. All right, we have He-Man. Now, he's actually Prince Adam, who again has to play the part of an aloof, Bruce Wayne. He's kind of a namby-pamby. He can't show his hand that he's the most powerful man in the universe. He has a mother figure and a father figure in the sorceress, who kind of tries to explain to him the ways of his powers and so forth. And he has Duncan, who is like his uncle, Tila's father, and he's sort of the guy that gives him the heroic guidance, what it's like to live a life of service like this. Very important themes. And then Tila is adopted by Man at Arms. We don't know anything about her father, but her mother is the sorceress, and the idea is that she'll someday be groomed to take her mother's place as the most powerful woman in the universe, basically guarding the secrets of Castle Grayskull. And a lot of other elements are brought in. We have He-Man. Adam can't let his parents know that he's actually He-Man. He can't let them know that he's a hero. His father obviously thinks less of him, thinks he's a goof and a ne'er-do-well. He wants to impress his father, but he can't tell him that he's He-Man. We got some other shades of these characters from the movie. Like, for instance, is there sort of a subtle kind of romance between Skeletor and Evil Lyn? There seems to be something there between them, but Skeletor is really too full of himself to really have a soulmate. And these are like questions that we really play with. And I mean, there's a lot of, changing of sides. You wonder if Evil Lyn is going to try to strike out on her own. Are they going to sort of abandon Skeletor, these minions of his that are very ill-treated? And so, I mean, there's a lot of stuff to work with here, and this movie does work with a lot of it. I think they held back on some of it in order to have something for the sequel. So to wrap it up here and give just sort of the non-spoiler review, there were a lot of things that I didn't like, but I think in comparison with the last movie, this movie, they actually were like 70% there. Nobody could really deny the images. I mean, a lot of these characters looked like the action figures come to life in many ways. A lot of the tone, the colors, the feel of it feels very much like authentic He-Man. I think they may have pushed it too far in a campy area. There's been some comparisons to the 1980s Flash Gordon, and I think that's the barometer for this. I mean, if you didn't mind Flash Gordon and that kind of jokey take where we're serious but not really, you know what I mean? It's the same thing here. And personally, I enjoyed Flash Gordon when I was a kid, but even as a kid, I grew up on the Filmation Flash Gordon animated series. So by the time I seen Flash Gordon when it was on cable, on HBO or something, I had already seen the animated series, and I was like, why aren't they taking this seriously? This, is really a good story. I remember it from the cartoon. Why aren't they taking it seriously? Why are they having these winks of the camera and these jokey lines that, I could tell they're not taking it seriously? And I feel like to a lesser extent, that's kind of what they're doing here as well. It's not as campy, I don't think, as Flash Gordon to an extent, but I do feel like they could have taken it a little bit more seriously, and so that kind of takes a couple of points off it. I'm going to get into it now, but I would recommend this movie, particularly if you're a He-Man fan. I don't see why you wouldn't want to see this on the big screen, drink it in, enjoy all the, the sights and sounds. Basically what I said about The Mandalorian and Grogu. If you're a child of the 80s, why wouldn't you want to see Star Wars again on the big screen? People are trying to punish Disney. Oh, well, that's great. You had a chance to see some more Disney Star Wars spectacle, but because it's Disney, you didn't want to do it. Okay. Same thing here. I mean, you're getting pretty much as accurate a He-Man movie as you're probably going to get. We took 40 years to get here. I don't know if I've got 40 more years left in me to wait for the next one. So I hope that enough people go see it and just give it a chance. And if you don't like it, then, all right, I understand. Of course, a lot of people that are poo-pooing the cartoon and acting like it's not that great also are treating this like, well, it's a flop. It's already a disaster. And the Amazon people who are behind this have already come out and said, we're satisfied. We're satisfied with the numbers. Because you got to remember, again, I'm not going to go into a rant about this as I do most of the time, but it's not the same anymore. The numbers, everybody, all these armchair execs with, it needs 300 more million just to clear the marketing budget. And, you don't really know what you're talking about. Okay. Can we be honest? There's so many other factors that these guys that are the real studio execs, they factor in. They know they're going to get more in the streaming revenue. They know they're going to get more in DVD sales and merchandise. They figure all this stuff out. So if they say that they're satisfied, and they possibly are going to put a sequel on Amazon Prime. So if they make a direct Amazon Prime sequel, like they're doing with the Lord of the Rings show that everybody hates, people might tune in there. That drives up Amazon Prime numbers, and they're happy. There's more than just saying this film bombed. It's underperformed so far. It could still pick up and make a profit. Just because it's not a blockbuster doesn't mean. A lot of people are acting like, well, the 80s are over. 80s nostalgia is over. No, it just means that you tried to make a film that was influenced by another film that underperformed, 1980s Flash Gordon. So you kind of have to ask yourself, what did you think was going to happen if you're basing your, upcoming blockbuster using the template of a film that basically flopped because it wasn't, being taken seriously. So again, I probably give this a B plus. I feel like its heart is in the right place, and they're trying, and they gave us a lot of good set pieces that I'm going to want to go back and see again and again. It had some really high highs that I know 5-year-old me would have spazzed out over, seeing, oh, look at what He-Man's doing and this and that. And then there's other parts that were just cringe inducing. Stuff that I don't know how they okayed it. I don't know how anybody saw this in the script and said, yeah, let's put that in the movie. So, I mean, it's a balancing act, and it gets it right more than it doesn't. But you're gonna have to go in there with your, expectations tempered. because I don't know if you're going to be ready for it being this kind of, campy comedic tone. I think a lot of us probably wouldn't have had it quite that badly. But again, it's not that ridiculous. It's not as campy, I don't think, as a Flash Gordon. All right, so let's get into the spoilers. Let's talk about the story at large. Basically, what this story does is they take Prince Adam, and the beginning of the movie is great. It's the attack of Skeletor that pretty much plunges Eternia into over a decade of darkness. And Adam is sent to Earth. Now, this is kind of interesting that they do this because on the one hand, of course, the original He-Man movie, a large portion of it was set on Earth. It was basically to keep the cost down because filming in a small town, it looked like a Back to the Future town, filming it there, was going to save them a lot of money on sets. And also, I think sending him to Earth, it's a very much of a Superman thing, but it was also something they did with She-Ra, where she was sent to Etheria to protect her, or she got whisked away or something. And I think they're kind of using the same idea, which, again, spoilers, and this is a tag for the end, but of course I knew they were going to show the She-Ra hint that, if there's a sequel, then they're going to go into She-Ra lore as well. But, so the idea was there that he gets sent to Earth. Now, they sort of flash forward. He gets sent to Earth as a child, 8, 9 years old. And when we flash forward to him being an adult, being like 24 years old or whatever he is, 15 years later. And, the film goes out of its way not to answer the questions that you're obviously asking, like who found him? Who raised him? What is the story here? And they don't answer that. And I, for one, am glad. I don't think too many people have complained about that because honestly, nobody wanted the Earth scenes to last that long anyway. So if you're looking for like real answers as to, storyline answers, you're not going to get them. And I don't think you need them. So Adam loses the sword when he comes through the portal to go to Earth. And he spends ostensibly the rest of his time up until the point of this movie looking for it. And he's placing like a bounty on whoever finds it. And he's trying to find the sword. And the first thing we'll point out is like a lot of people were on the fence wondering, is it woke? Is it not woke? Is it anti-woke? Is it pro-woke? I don't think this film is pro-woke, but I do think they're trying to walk a very strange tightrope to balance it. On the one hand, we've seen, as you just seen it in the trailer as well, Adam is in an office. He's in cubicle and stuff, and the boss calls him in, chews him out in sort of a very, touchy-feely way that you're supposed to talk to people these days. And she basically is telling him not to look for the sword, especially on company time and this and that. And we get all the buzzwords and the political correctness and the he, him, and we can all work together and this and that. And the film plays it as, that is like a lot of baloney. Let me just try to keep it PG rated. That it's all nonsense. And Adam treats it like it's nonsense. He's like basically rolling his eyes and having to endure it the way we've had to for like the last 20 years. And it's sort of, it sets itself up against what the 80s were, which was a time of freedom, the last time of freedom, because people forget political correctness started in the 90s and then wokeness started in the 2000 teens, I guess. So we had political correctness for 20 years, and then we've had, wokeness for the last 15 years. And the film does treat it like, we know this is ridiculous. We know that no normal human being talks like this. Nobody asks for pronouns in a normal world. Nobody treats each other like this. Nobody has this phony sort of human interaction with another person unless they're being made to do it. And so, I mean, that is to me the anti wokeness of it. What kind of bothered me about this joke is that it kind of goes on for too long. Now, in the rest of the movie, and we'll jump around because that's kind of what I do, the weave, as President Trump would say. But later on in the movie, He-Man tries to evoke what he had learned in the woke world when trying to deal with people like Trapjaw and Skeletor and this and that. And I can see it like the first time when he tries to do it with Trapjaw. Um, but he's trying to do like team building with the rest of the Eternian heroes and trying to talk down Trapjaw using these kind of weak platitudes, and he gets his butt kicked. And I feel like that was all we really needed for that, to show that it doesn't work in the real world. That's not beneficial to you to know how to do that, and it doesn't help you. So they kind of go back to that well like two or three more times. And I think the message was right there that you're not going to use these kind of skills that they're teaching you in the woke world of how to treat people. It doesn't work like that in the real world. And of course, Man at Arms, they get him very right, and in many ways, with him being, like I said, the mentor figure for Adam and telling him, look, there comes a time when you have to protect your family. Essentially, you have to kick butt, and you can't just play with words. You have to take action. You have to be a man of action if you're going to protect your family and your friends and basically your society, your tribe. So again, I felt that it wasn't woke, but I feel like they tried to go back to the well too often. They tried to go back to the tightrope of Adam did kind of learn something from his experience in the woke world, and he tries to use it to temper the manliness side of it, the masculinity, and he tries to temper it with, well, I know that I can't just punch people all the time. I gotta talk it out sometimes. Now, the He-Man cartoon show was like that in the sense where He-Man was like Superman. He was a benevolent figure. He didn't go out there punching people all the time without good cause. And I feel like they're trying to sort of give him an origin where that kind of thing comes from. He's a child of both worlds. It's tempered with getting this kind of HR training, and then also the practicality of being a He-Man on Eternia. All right, so let's get moving here because we got to move on with this review. But let me try to take these things a little more character by character. Going back to the beginning of the movie, Adam is, is seen as a disappointment by his father, King Randor. And again, I feel like this is very true to the original show. The problem is, though, is the original show, He-Man was like 18 years old, 17 years old, whatever he was at that point in the Filmation Classic. And it didn't really ring as true with him sort of berating an 8-year-old, saying, well, you're not ever going to amount to anything. You're not a good warrior. Well, the kid is kind of, barely out of diapers, kind of. I mean, this kid looked really young. I mean, he looked obviously weak, and expecting him to be like this fearsome fighter at that age was ridiculous. And Man at Arms sort of tries to take him under his wing, and it's again, that's that classic storyline of wanting to be accepted by his father. You want your father to give you a pat on the back and say, yeah, you did good, or at least you tried. And particularly if you're a kid in the 80s, you didn't really get that. And I kind of felt that was something they were purposely going for, and something that worked. A lot of it is the fathers and sons, or the father figures and the daughters. And I think they got a lot of those things right. Later on, Randor dies, which he never dies in the original show or any of the shows that I'm aware of. And it's kind of sad because they make it it happened so fast that I really don't know exactly how this happened, but He-Man is like breaking through Evelyn's force field or something, and it causes a rock slide or an avalanche, or however you would call it, an indoor cave-in that basically kills Randor. And Randor does the sort of macho saying it but not saying it. Yeah, I'm really proud of you, and you know what he wanted to hear all his life. Now you take that and you juxtaposition it with Duncan and Tila. Now, first, let's get the elephant out of the room right away, where they race change Man at Arms. Now, this personally to me was upsetting because my headcanon was that Duncan was actually the biological father of Tila, only that, because Sorceress was, and ostensibly still is in this film, even though they make no mention of her parentage at all. Sorceress is Tila's mother, and in my head canon, at least as a kid, I always figured that there was something going on between Duncan and the sorceress, and they just didn't want anybody to know about it because it would have been a weakness for the sorceress. Because we couldn't tell anybody that Tila was her daughter because they would try to use her as a bargaining chip to try to get into Grayskull. And in the same way, if they knew that she had feelings for Duncan, Duncan would be the bargaining chip to get her to let these villains into Grayskull. So they had to keep it quiet that there was a secret marriage between them or something. But obviously, if you've race changed the character, you're not going to have that backstory that I invented in my head. And she's obviously adopted. And like I said, they didn't talk about this at all. You're kind of left to just surmise that because obviously they're not the same race. So it's pretty obvious that there weren't going to be a biological father and daughter. And they give Duncan a story arc here, a character arc that was interesting. Now, in a way, I could see this rubbing fans the wrong way because what they're trying to say is basically Duncan lost. He didn't succeed at protecting Adam and his family. And so he becomes an alcoholic. He just throws in the towel because Skeletor took over. It was basically on his watch. He couldn't do anything about it. And so he's a shell of a man now. Now, yeah, honestly, I don't feel like that's what Duncan would have done, knowing him from the cartoons. I kind of feel like he would have found a way to get to Earth and try to raise Adam and bring him back to Eternia. But again, they didn't do that here. And I'll talk about the Sorceress in a minute, too, because she does nothing really to help the situation either with Adam, but we'll get to that in a second. But the story arc there is basically for Tila's benefit. Now, Tila basically spends most of the movie sort of rebuking Duncan on how, he hasn't stepped up, how he's failed. And again, this is another thing where I think it's sort of like in the 80s, you kind of did that. You kind of, your father didn't really amount to what he was supposed to, and you've seen the potential, but then again, he really doesn't do anything. That's like the opposite of like what Adam's storyline is here. And so she kind of sees Adam as the guy that he was yearning his whole life to come back to Eternia. He's looking for the sword. He's being proactive. He's trying to find it and take up his mantle and do his duty. And then she's disappointed by her father not doing that. He threw in the towel. He failed. He's just a 9-to-5er. He's not trying to get any more than, a flask of whiskey at the end of the night and just rolling over and going to bed. And so she sees Adam as being this, go-getter, so to speak. And her father isn't, and is a disappointment. And of course, it leads to reconciliation with them by the end. And they do a hug and embrace that sort of is the image of what they did a lot in Filmation, where they hugged at the end of an episode, because Tila and Man at Arms were always really close. So it felt good that they kind of tried to play to their relationship. But again, I don't know if that would really rub fans the wrong way of trying to put Man at Arms in that kind of character. Again, Idris Elba did a good job here. All the actors did a good job. Nicholas Geslantine, I think is his name. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly. He did very good. He was very likable. He plays Adam as sort of the likable schlub, and then as He-Man, he's forceful enough. Camila Mendes was just perfect in this role, to be honest with you. I mean, I felt like she was very accurate to the personality in the cartoon. That's like I was just describing. Basically, that's her storyline there. Now, they didn't push her and Adam into any kind of romance. And I've seen some people trying to comment on that as if it was a bad thing. But to be honest with you, they never really had a romance in the cartoons. In the film, she says basically, "Oh, you're like a brother to me," and that's true because I feel like in the cartoon, she had sort of feelings for He-Man while she was feeling like a big sister to Adam. And in the film, they actually do seem to have an age difference of about 3 years for them. I mean, Tila looks to be like 11 maybe in the prologue there, the beginning scenes, and Adam, like I said, looks like he's about 9. So 8 or 9, 11, 12, there's a little bit of a difference there where she's sort of like a big sister to him. And I feel like they got that relationship right. Now, the problem is, and again, this is one of the things that I didn't like about the film, was not having the secret identity. That is something that the Hollywood is against for some reason these days. You can't have the secret identity. And one of the big things about He-Man was the secret identity. Again, his father will never know that he is keeping the secret that he is He-Man, that he is a macho and tough character. Tila will never know that Adam is not, you know, a hero, a macho character. So she obviously is going to think less of him. And they kind of even have a joke about it where it's like he goes off to change and the rest of the team is like, he knows we know, right? You know, I didn't like that. I think that the secret identity is important in the comic heroes, and I think it's as important in this show as it was in Filmation. They decided to take it out. So that was another strike that I was kind of disappointed in, that they really weren't going to do anything with that. Let's go back to the Sorceress. We're kind of taking them character by character. The Sorceress is given about the same treatment here as she was in the 87 film. She's basically bookended. In the 87 film, she's captured at the beginning. The whole plan is to free her. They free her at the end. And that was smart because the Sorceress is so powerful and so important that they really didn't know what to do with her other than to put her in Skeletor's control, that she was imprisoned by him or whatever. This Sorceress, Monica Baccarin, which I was disappointed they didn't give her the feather dress. That honestly, to me, was the most disappointing thing about the costuming. They try to put the cast in the real costume at the end, where Tila actually has the bare legs, even though she has the oversized skirt. But that's another thing. They kind of slyly tried to give her a lot of booty shots, Tila, which were appreciated because that's a lot of what the animation was in the original cartoon. There were always like booty shots of Tila. In order to make sure she didn't look too curvaceous, though, they gave her these weirdly stitched pants that were like keeping the male gaze at bay by sort of having some weird, mid pants weave that was quite unlike what we got in the cartoons. I mean, these were cartoons in the 80s, and we were allowed to do that, but we're not allowed to do that in a 2026 movie. So go figure. But again, the Sorceress is kind of sidelined. She shows up at the end mostly to sort of give a pep talk to Adam. The other thing that I didn't like, basically, besides the secret identity thing, was that there wasn't much difference between Adam and He-Man. Basically, He-Man is Adam with powers. They didn't make him like this vastly improved person. He was just like muscular, and that was it. And I understand people felt that way about Shazam, the Shazam movie, where it's basically Billy with powers. Shazam is supposed to be the wisdom of Solomon, and he's supposed to have all these powers at his disposal that makes him sort of the epitome of the male adult. And instead, the Zachary Levi movies, he's basically just Billy in an adult body. Big with powers is the way they usually frame it. And I didn't really mind Shazam that much because honestly, I guess I'm not that big of a Shazam fan to really have been upset with it. But I am a big He-Man fan, and I felt like they should have given him some more confidence when he became He-Man. And at least in the beginning, he was kind of like the greatest American hero, where he's trying to figure out what he's doing, and he's, not really sure what he's doing. And when he's doing something, it doesn't always work out that well. So I would have had him have a little more confidence as He-Man. But again, this is an origin, and maybe that's what they're trying to lead into. Again, a lot of these origin films, they are what the kids call these days surf Dracula, which is they basically take the whole movie to get the hero where he's supposed to be. Um, I think, let's see, what haven't we touched on here? Cringer isn't in the movie enough. But again, he wasn't in the 87 movie at all. And I felt like, well, Battle Cat's a big budget. I would imagine that's kind of tough. So I realized they weren't going to put him in all the way through. Hopefully, he gets more time in a sequel. But again, they didn't really have Battle Cat transform like He-Man does in the cartoon by pointing the sword at him. That's another pet peeve I have. I know I'm sounding pretty negative about some of these things, but He-Man, even in the 87 film, he's supposed to point the sword upward, call down the power of Grayskull, and then absorb it with both hands through the sword. And both in the Lundgren version and in this version, he does not grab the sword with both hands when he says, I have the power. I don't understand that. Why is that so difficult? They've never been able to get that right in live action. I don't know why. The costuming was very good, as I said. Dolph Lundgren does make an appearance. He's in the gym at the beginning of the movie. Now, I thought it was very disappointing to me. We're going to talk about Skeletor in a minute, but it was disappointing to me at the end of the film when they had this bizarre cringe. Skeletor's going through, Adam's time on Earth, and he's showing up in the gym, and he's showing up in the office and making homoerotic comments. This was so cringe, and I don't understand how anybody that was writing this film, directing this film, editing this film thought that scene was a good idea. What they really should have done was save Dolph Lundgren for that scene, have him be, King Grayskull, and let him impart some, words of encouragement to Adam while he's facing Skeletor. They kind of had the Sorceress play that part. I understand that they needed the Sorceress to do something in this film because she really was kind of a non-entity for the most part. But that was the place to use him, and using him where they did, and he said good journey, which of course everybody knew what that meant. That was from the movie, and that was great. But you could have used him so much more effectively had you used him in that scene and cut out that horrible, cringy scene. That was really awful. Now let's go to Skeletor and Jared Leto, who for some reason everybody hates. I don't know. I mean, people say he's the kiss of death with the movie. I thought Morbius was okay. It was very good. It wasn't great, but it was good. And I didn't see the Tron sequel. I know the Suicide Squad version Joker wasn't great. So understandably, his filmography has been hit and miss. But I thought they got Skeletor. They really got him great. The characterization was great. He was a diva. He was frightening. He was intense. He was goofy. They basically ran the gambit of Filmation meets Frank Langella, the versions, and they basically had it all in Skeletor, and he really steals the show because every time he's on, he's magnetic. You really focus on him, and I feel like the voice was a little different. It wasn't as goofy, but it worked. Some of what he said was kind of garbled, and you had to kind of zone in on what he was saying. But it worked. I think it worked, and the look was great. And a lot of people have sort of, I don't know, bashed Alison Brie's Evil Lynn. I don't know why. I thought she was great. I thought she was good in this. I mean, again, you're pairing her with a Skeletor that's sort of a diva and a very what's the word beside diva? I mean, he was basically a diva, and you pair Evelyn with that, and of course she kind of comes off as a she's sort of placating him and trying to keep him, happy and content because he's, a very cantankerous character. And I thought she was good at that. I thought she was very good. Now, I think a lot of people were kind of hoping more for the assertive Evelyn, the one that's kind of plotting against Skeletor and wants to take him out eventually. I didn't get that sense from this Evelyn, and I like that. I like that they played her more like the Meg Foster Evelyn, because Meg Foster, it felt like her Evelyn sort of had a thing for Skeletor, and in a different time, at a different place, they would have been lovers, but it really kind of wasn't in the cards anymore. And I kind of felt like there was something like that going on here. Um, you get the sense too that it was the same with the Meg Foster Evelyn, where he was, so full of himself, Skeletor, that it really wasn't going to work. And she's not beyond walking away from him if he sort of starts to lose it. Like, when he was doing the whole godlike power thing in the 87 film, and then he starts losing, and she just kind of like takes her troops and walks away. And it's the same thing in this movie, where basically Evelyn's fighting Tila, which I thought was going to be a bigger fight. It really wasn't that big of a fight, but anyway, she basically tells Tila, look, we could just walk off and let these two finish their fight, and may the best man win. And so I felt like they really did right by Evelyn, and I thought that, Alison Brie did a great job. I don't see what anybody's problem was with her. And I feel like, the look of her was also, of course, down pat. They gave her like which I was never fond of in the cartoon, but the weird looking white hair they gave her. They gave her sort of the sallow yellowish skin. So she looked great. Again, we're still just coming out of the woke era, and they had to have her wear pants. She couldn't wear the bathing suit style costume, just like Tila couldn't wear the bathing suit style costume. Hopefully those kind of things could be changed in the future, but as it stands now, it was still a good performance. A lot of the other characters, let's talk about them. The supporting characters here, they had a lot of the characters from the movie, from the animated show, as well as the 87 movie. Karg was brought back with the hook hand from the 87 movie. He was a big player in that movie. Beast Man, who was in both movies, they did a great job with him. Triclops on the villain side, Spikor. A couple of guys I was hoping to see that were always around that weren't in this was Whiplash and Clawful. Of course, they could always do what was the King Hiss and the Snake Men? That's something you could bring in a sequel. For the heroes, they had Mechaneck, Ram Man, and Fisto, of course. And again, there was some goofy humor here that also could have been toned down. I mean, everybody knew they were going to make a joke of Fisto's name, but it's like they carried on with that like literally 5 times. And it's like, yeah. I remember saying when I was doing a review of the Pirates of the Caribbean films, one of them, I don't remember which one, and I remember saying, basically, when you're doing a raunchy joke, you have the lead up, you have the joke, and you have the kicker. Somebody does the straight line, somebody does the joke, and then somebody else does, the additional line to put the extra oomph on it. That's all you needed. You don't need to go over it like 5 times. Now, most of these jokes are innuendo, but most of them I think would go over kids' heads. I don't know if that would necessarily be a reason not to show this to a kid. Another thing was kind of strange was there was a lot of killing by He-Man, it seemed like. They didn't really shy away from the fact that, people were getting stabbed, people were getting impaled, people were getting thrown off buildings and stuff. I don't know what that says about He-Man, because he was never like that in the cartoons. In fact, there was an episode, if I remember correctly, where a popular episode was where He-Man thinks he killed somebody, and he basically wants to give up the power sword. He wants to forsake the power of He-Man because he misused it because somebody died. And so again, that was another thing that I was like, I don't know if that's exactly cricket. But again, I went into this knowing I'd have to grade it on the curve. It wasn't going to be one-to-one correspondence of the Filmation film. So, I mean, some things you're either going to go with it or you're not. That I was like, okay, I guess I'll go with it. But I don't know, kind of disappointing. Moss Man, was the sacrificial victim here. I felt bad about that because in the original Masters of the Universe film, um, Skeletor takes out Sarad, and in this, he takes out a good guy because back in that movie he was taking out one of his mercenaries, but here he takes out Moss Man, who of course was a favorite, and he doesn't get a chance to really do anything before he gets taken out. He's just basically a prisoner, and that's kind of sad. I mean, I think there comes a time when you have to, you can do away with a hero or a villain, but you have to have given them their due first. And I feel like, he was just kind of a prisoner. Why didn't he get his due first? They gave this other character, this female character, with two guns, sort of a big role. I think only because, again, it was a studio mandated thing of let there be another female character besides Tila. And I don't know that they needed her, but I think she was sort of like a quick draw. There was a character in He-Man, I think, I don't know if I could look this up fast enough, but he sort of looked like Chuck Norris. I don't know if anybody remembers this, and he had like a gun that he pulled from his vest. Let me see. Yeah, Rio Blast was his name, and I have a feeling that was the character they were trying to go for. But honestly, he was like a quick draw character. He sort of looked like Chuck Norris. I don't know why they just didn't use him, but then again, maybe they still can because they never specified. What was her name? Dio? Maybe that's the reason why they called her Dio, because her brother is Rio Blast. I don't know. But again, that's something else that they could have used an actual He-Man character. Cyclone wasn't in it. Snout Spout. I mean, there was a lot of guys. Buzz Off. I think they have an Easter egg at the end of the film where they're talking about the Avon village or something, and I think that's where Stratos comes in. So they're probably gonna bring him in. Zodak. They name drop him. Again, he was always a strange character when I was a kid. I never really got Zodak. He was like he was like the Watcher from the Marvel. He knew everything that was going on. He knew He-Man was He-Man, but then again, it's like he really didn't intervene with the characters all that much. He'd show up once in a while and do something, and then go back to his lofty life somewhere. I don't know, in the cosmos. I don't know. Speaking of the cosmos, let's not forget my all-time favorite guitarist, Brian May, contributed to the soundtrack, and his guitar is very prevalent in this film. They don't do the He-Man song, the actual cartoon He-Man theme, until the very end, another Surf Dracula thing, but they do keep a very sort of 80s synth type vibe going, and I feel like they they do sort of their homage to Queen from Flash Gordon somewhat here. And my biggest thrill actually was, it's Masters of the Universe, right? What better song can you play than Princes of the Universe, the Queen classic from Highlander? And they play that, and it's just, you know, it's just nectar from the gods, as they say. It just works so well here, and it's great. I just love that part, and I think like the music was really good. I don't have the name of the composer here, but again, he really knew the assignment, and he did a great job with it. So that was good. Another character, Roboto. I think it was played by Kristen Wiig. I think they made Roboto a female here. Again, it seemed like they were still trying to check boxes, because I think this was greenlit during the end of the woke era. And the idea was still, well, we're going to gender change, we're going to race change a few things. If it came out today, maybe it'd be a little different. I mean, if it was written today, it was greenlit today. But that didn't bother me too much, because it seemed like the idea was she was a Rosie the robot from the Jetsons, and they reprogrammed her to be a battle droid, So it seemed to work in the context of the movie, but it's like it really could have been more accurate had they given the male voice. They could have very easily made it a C3PO or a K2SO or something like that, where he was a sort of posh, uh, manservant sort of, and then become a fighting warrior at the end. Let's see. Is there anything else basically we've missed? Well, there's the big fight, the big finish with Skeletor. And again, it it irrevocably took me out of it when they did that weird, bizarre scene with him going through all the past of Adam's Earth years. That was just so bizarre. My brother actually picked up an Easter egg. The girl that he was trying to impress Adam when he was on a date by telling her about all his life on Eternia was named Julie, which was, of course, from the '87 Masters of the Universe movie. Courtney Cox, her character. Um, but the fight where he sort of like tries to talk Skeletor down, that did feel very much in keeping with the cartoon He-Man. Again, I don't know what they were going for with that. Um, but again, it did feel like it paid tribute to that. I don't know if they were trying to say that the woke, was worth trying or something like that. But I mean, trying to get through to Skeletor seems like something He-Man always did. And of course, he realized at a certain point there that there comes a time when you don't talk and your fists do the talking. And he had to take out Skeletor the best way he knew how, which was with the good old fashioned fisticuffs. I feel like they that was a good scene, but I feel like they kind of gave up on the sword fighting a little too early. Um, I was expecting more, maybe because the original He-Man movie was a lot of sword fighting, but this turned into sort of Thunder Punch He-Man, if you remember that figure, where he has like these thunder punches that made a pow and a smack. And it felt very strange to me to see Skeletor get vaporized, but I knew immediately that that wasn't going to last because they did have the last scene be like, again, an homage to Flash Gordon, where, Ming somehow survives getting impaled. And in this case, Evelyn picks up the skull of Skeletor, which is all that remains. And, obviously he, with magic being involved, Evelyn and Skeletor both being sorcerers in some way, it doesn't take much to figure that he can come back. And again, I felt like it was a little strange too that usually the goal for Skeletor is to get into Castle Grayskull. They seem to get into Grayskull without much difficulty. It's always been in the cartoons and pretty much every incarnation of He-Man that I know that it's difficult for Skeletor to get into Grayskull because that's what he needs to summon the power of Grayskull and this and that. It didn't seem like it was that difficult for him here. So again, I don't know if maybe they should have played into that a little bit more. We finally get to see Orko. I was, like I knew he wasn't going to have a big part in it because, like I said, he's basically the Jar Jar of the He-Man universe. So I kind of knew they were going to downplay him a little bit, but we do get him at the end doing sort of what the He-Man cartoon did, which is offer the moral of the story. And he's, basically saying what He-Man learned over the course of this movie in sort of a tongue-in-cheek post-credit scene. And of course, the other post-credit scene was showing She-Ra from the back. And I think they purposely are holding out on seeing if they can get a real actress that, they want to cast for the role. But right now they're just trying to hint that She-Ra is going to be in the sequel. And again, I hope there is going to be a sequel. I really do. I enjoyed it. Again, as a He-Man purist, they weren't there 100%. They were there maybe 70%. The battle with Trapjaw, when Duncan sort of, gets his mojo back and he ends up taking out Trapjaw, apparently killing him, although we didn't see a body. It's another one of those type things. A lot of these characters, I feel like I didn't want to see them die. A lot of them didn't, but I would like to see them kind of expand on them later. And I mean, there probably could be a good 10 minutes maybe that this film could have trimmed to make it a little more serious, to make it a little less goofy. I mean, they had the big finish at the end where they try to set up like the next film where it's going to be more like the original premise as much as they can, since some of it they've already ruined, like the secret identity. But they also have it that like Adam named these people what they're called, and it's like he called him Fisto, he called him Ram Man, he called him Mechanic, and that's why that's their names. Part of me doesn't like that because it's like they keep acting like, well, what did you call us? That's ridiculous. And it's like, on the one hand, the names are ridiculous because it's a kid's property, and it's much funnier to just go with that and say, well, that's their names, that's why. And it's like kind of stupid to be like, well, they don't want to be called Ram Man. Well, what are you going to call him? Phil? Fisto is Bob? You know what I mean? It's like, I kind of feel like when they kept acting like, what are you calling me? It's like, well, what do you want to be called, Bob? Just Bob? You know what I mean? It's like, it's kind of strange. I mean, you never think about that as a kid that, well, why aren't they named Bob and Phil and Joe? Because Duncan is kind of named a reasonably human name. But again, it's like you don't really need that explanation. Oh, another thing I wanted to mention is Queen Marlena. They did do that from the cartoon, the original cartoon, where she was from Earth. His last name, Adam, is Glenn. At least in so much as his Earth persona, because she was a relative of John Glenn, and she was an astronaut like him. I don't know if it was supposed to be her father or grandfather or something, and she was an astronaut. She found herself stranded on Eternia, and she married King Randor. And of course, she sends Adam to Earth because that was her home, that was her birthplace before she made her way there to Eternia. So I mean, again, they did get a lot of things from the animated show right. So to wrap this one up, yeah, I pretty much enjoyed it. I would give it. This is a film that it's going to either grow on me, or I'm going to, I don't know, have the things that bothered me continue to bother me more. I really can't get my head around it too good with only one viewing. I'm probably not going to see it again in theaters, but I'm definitely going to pick up the DVD and try to internalize this one a little bit more. But I would give it 3.5 stars. Maybe a point gets taken off because of some of the wokeness. It's not woke, but you know what I mean. The race changes, the sort of overdoing the woke. Even though it's making light of woke, it's like a little bit too much in there. And then maybe there's like a couple of things as a purist I'm not a fan of. So I could grade it on the curve, maybe being 4 stars, 3.5 to 4 stars, 7 out of 10 maybe, a B plus, possibly an A minus after I see it a second or third time. Maybe I'll feel a bit better about it, because I kind of am on the verge of saying this is better than average, but it's still not 100%. It's not really 100%. I feel like it feels a lot like Superman, last year's Superman from James Gunn, where it feels like they had all the pieces in place. Everything looks great. It could be a 5-star movie if they kind of just got out of their own way. Like Gunn had to do the thing with Jor-El and Lara. He had to kind of put some of his goofy, humor or whatever into the film. And, that's kind of what drags it down from a perfect score. And in the same way, it's the same thing here. If we could have cut that out a little bit more, if we could have focused on a few other things a little bit more that were in the original show, you probably would have a 5 out of 10 for me. But as it stands now, pretty good. I enjoyed it. I think everybody should see it. If you're a He-Man fan, like I said, why not? You should see it on the big screen. This might be the last chance you get to see something from Masters of the Universe on the big screen. If you didn't grow up with He-Man, if you know nothing about Masters of the Universe, I think you probably would like this even more than a He-Man fan, because it's all new to you. And the little niggling things that I've been complaining about, like no secret identity, and He-Man doesn't have as much disconnect from Adam as I would like, those kind of things probably ain't going to mean anything to you because you just know He-Man from this movie. So again, I would give it a chance on that basis. All right, so now the ball is in your court. Let me know what you think. Let me know in the comments below. And as usual, I'll be sure to read them on a subsequent live broadcast. And so until next we meet, this is Johnny Torch reminding you, keep the flame burning brightly, and I'll be with you again real soon.